Welcome back. We're continuing with Rabbi Yonash Steif's holy work, Mitzvos Hashem, meaning to literally the commandments of God Almighty. As we explained last week, commandment, mitzvah, the word mitzvah in holy tongue means to say to connect God Almighty's loving divine guidance on how to connect with Him. When we connect with God Almighty, we're really connecting with ourselves because God Almighty has created every single human being in His divine image, meaning to say that God Almighty is investing Himself in every single human being. It says in the Geras Tshuva, the third section of Tanya, from the Alter Rebbe, that God Almighty invests in a human being in tremendously more divine energy than He does in the entire rest of the creation. And it's interesting to note that we say that one human being is like an entire universe, meaning to say a human being has within him the entire creative energy of God Almighty, is bringing this human being to existence, and every detail of the human being is essential, it's vital, it's an entire world. And it's not just a flowery expression. It's showing the intention of God Almighty, because just as even more than what He puts into the entire universe, the physical universe, what He puts into a human being is even greater. So we have to understand that we're here with a divine intention. And that leads us to the third of the commandments that we're going to be addressing in Mitzvos Hashem. We're up to the 384th page. The commandment against sexual immorality. And the actual term used in the Holy Tongue is Gilui Arayos, which means to say that it's literally like the revelation of the intimate, the revelation of what is not meant to be revealed, not meant to be participated in outside of what God Almighty has invested this energy into us. This energy that God Almighty gives us, the sexual energy, is an energy that is coming from the divine creative energy. It is the most divine of our energy, meaning to say, when we move our hand, we can do wonderful things with our hand, but the act of coming together, a man coming together with his wife, is bringing the divine creative energy to the forefront, the awareness that this is the ability for a man and woman to create a new human being. And we are not allowed to divert that energy, and we're not allowed to prevent that energy. We're not allowed to prevent that energy from coming to fruition, from bringing forth children into the world. So God Almighty gives a human being this energy. Now, we know that every living thing, its primary focus is actually on bringing more life into the world. If you look and see everything from the bees, the ants, the flies, trees, the trees are producing flowers to attract the bees to be able to pollinate at the flowers in order to be able to bring more trees into the world. What's the whole point of the fruit? The whole point of the fruit is to be able to create a seed and to be able to have that seed transported to a new location to create a bright new future for this tree, that there should come out millions of seeds from that. So we see that everything is coming in the tremendous force, this beautiful life energy of every living thing is the real definition of life. You talk about what's the definition of biology, what's the real number one law of life. So you have the laws of physics, the laws of chemistry. No one's really articulated the laws of life, because the reason that people have not articulated what the laws of life are is because they're thinking of it from a mechanical perspective. We know that there's a law of physics, and you think, oh, what's the law of biology? Well, every animal is acting in a different way. Every living thing is acting in a different way. Of the trees like this, carrots like that. But because everyone's missing the divine, the real first law of biology is to increase life. That is the definition of life. The definition of life is to increase life. And that applies to all living things. A stone does not have the ability to increase itself, but a living thing does. And when you get to vegetation, tzomea, chayim, medaber, all have the incredible power to be able to bring more living things into the world. So the definition of life is increasing life. That's the law of biology. So what we need to understand is that that is a drive in us to increase life. And we are only allowed to use that divine energy in us to increase life, and increase life in a way that's going to lead to increasing more life. So why is it essential for this energy to be brought out in a marriage between a husband and a wife? Is because the most life-increasing way to bring a child into the world, that the mother is supported through the pregnancy and through the childbirth and through the raising of the child by a husband who's attentive and caring and loving and present. The way to accomplish that is through absolute commitment that no matter what, this couple is going to be together, and therefore that child. So we can obviously see if the whole purpose of this divine energy is to bring more life into the world, then using it for anything else. For example, in the Tanya and in many holy Sfarim, it talks about the tremendous improper use of the divine energy if a person spills a seed, God forbid. And if a person refuses to get married, a person refuses to bring children into the world, a person prevents children from conception from happening, this is compared to murder. It's actually brought down that this is like murder. It's forbidden to bring a human being to prevent a human being from the world coming from the world. Because why is it forbidden to murder a human being? Not because of a social compact enlightenment idea. It's because the human being represents the divine image in the world, and to erase that divine image means to say that you are erasing the divine image in the world. God forbid anyone should do such a thing. So preventing a child from coming into existence is the same problem. Here's the potential to reveal the divine image in the world. The person preventing that is considered murder. He's preventing the divine image coming in the world. So you might ask yourself, okay, 1 second. So a person's going to be together with a woman without getting married. Also leads to a child. Why can't a person be together with someone else's wife? Why can't he be going to have children with all over the place? Is bringing children to the world. We just defined that the definition of life is to increase life. God Almighty has given us the power, the divine power to create another human being. So if a human being is the end result of the act of intimacy, then why should it matter what the context of the act of intimacy is? And the answer is because the act of intimacy does not stand in of itself. It's not a standalone act. Today, there's this concept of a one-night stand. A one-night stand is a person is completely stripping the act of intimacy from its entire proper holy context. Because the holy context is not just a definition that it has to be in an approved relationship. It's that what's the whole concept of it, of an endorsed relationship of the Torah? The Torah is saying you are creating a loving relationship. Life is to bring more life into the world, and life is for love. Meaning to say that it's a context of caring, of loving, of bringing, nurturing life into the world. Not a child created by somebody else. That is a secondary thing that a couple could adopt somebody else. The primary intention is to bring their own child into the world. Why? Because they are so valuable, they're so precious in God Almighty's eyes that He wants them to be replicated. And not through some sort of artificial process, but rather the goal is that the the husband and wife should come together and they should bring a child that emulates them into existence. That is the entire drive of creation, to have as many human beings as possible. So when we understand the context over here, we see that is tremendous significance of how a person uses his sexual energy, with whom, when, how, and what he does with the output. What the Enlightenment wants to do, what a Molech wants to do, is it wants to cool people off from that passion for bringing life into the world, the passion to connect in a way that only a man and woman can connect, that they, through intimacy, they are able to bring another human being into the world. And to strip that and make it into a mechanical act that has a positive experience on one level, although there's a lot of negative consequences to the way it happens when a person has intimacy without the proper person, without the proper context, without the proper intention. And what are the ramifications? Well, the spiritual devastation of being together, having intimacy with the intention of not having a child. That's a spiritually devastating experience every time for the person that's involved in that, because they are denying the divine energy that is there to bring another child into the world. The positive pleasure of being together, intimacy, is a representation of its holiness, of the degree to which it is the highest and most holy thing a person could possibly do, to bring and draw down the divine energy into fruition to bring another human being into the world. Therefore, it is an most ecstatic experience. To try to replicate that ecstasy without the proper context, a person is removing himself from the proper context. He's removing himself from the real, it's like having the high without the real accomplishment. So if a person is going to study a tractate in the Talmud and he's going to feel good about it. He's going to celebrate that with his friends. That is a high that comes from accomplishing something, from using his divine energy to connect to God Almighty and to bind his knowledge and his intellect and to use his entire energy to serve God Almighty. But a person could try to just get the high without the actual context. You go on a roller coaster. Oh, this is so much fun. But what does he have? There's nothing from it. So the connection between the husband and wife, God Almighty gives us a gift that through bringing children into the world, we are gifted with this bonding, this ability to be loving, and for the man to give to his wife. That's a divine gift. And the pleasure of it is because it is the pleasure, the physical pleasure is reflecting a divine pleasure. This completely refutes the false notions in the world spread by many misguided people that innocently got the wrong ideas, that somehow a man and woman to be together is somehow a not holy thing. Somehow it's a sin, and it's a necessary sin, and all these kind of things. That's all falsehood. That's all attacking the core of God Almighty's intention in creation, the core of recognizing and celebrating who you really are, that you are created to bring more children into the world. And Amalek comes today, the winds increase to get people to separate the experience of their sexual energy from the act of bringing children into the world into a thing in itself, which leads to destruction. Ultimate destruction, because when people are horrified, they see people are mutilating themselves, and that's just a more advanced open expression of what happens when a person does things that will not bring children into the world, or prevents himself from bringing children into the world. This divine commandment of bringing life into the world is so holy that even with animals, we're not allowed to prevent it. We are not allowed to sterilize an animal. It is forbidden to sterilize a dog, a cat, a bull. It's forbidden. What has happened is that it's become convenient to sterilize animals. It's become in some places mandated to sterilize animals. So some people get cats and dogs and they sterilize them because it's a rule. They don't want the trouble. They don't want the difficulties of having an animal that's mating and the offspring and all these kind of selfish reasons. But what they're doing is they are turning the animal into a toy or a tool. If in the case of a bull that's rendered incapable of having offspring and becomes an ox. This is a selfish destruction, not only of the animal's ability to reproduce according to God Almighty's intention, but also the human being is callously, you see what happens over the years. People are sterilizing animals, now they're sterilizing human beings. One of the first things that the Nazis did when they came to power within a few months was to start a sterilization program, which estimates are 3 million human beings were sterilized, to sterilize all the people that they thought were mentally incompetent and not worthy of reproduction. This then developed into euthanizing the sick, the people on the, so they prevented people from having more children, they got rid of the elderly and sick, and then they started to just get rid of wholesale populations of people in their goal to eradicate all of humanity, God forbid. But the concept of sterilization is to prevent, action T4. This is, I'm sure I didn't pronounce it with the proper German accent, but action T4. So this is when a person refuses to have children, he's just doing the same thing the Nazis did. Maybe it's voluntary. You have in China, you have a one-child policy, sometimes a two-child policy, all forcible abortions, birth control, sterilizing people. You have through U.S. aid and different United States programs forcing on third world countries, I don't know why they're called third world, but many wonderful human beings in places like India and Africa forcing forcible sterilization on them. But in America, there's no forcible sterilization programs. There's just a voluntary sterilization program that people only have 1.5 children or 2.1 children or whatever the number is. But obviously, a human being is capable of having 10, 15 kids. If only having 1 or 2 kids, then they are making a choice voluntarily. They don't need any Nazi or communist officer in China or wherever, or Cuba, to come and force them not to have a child. They volunteered for Amalek's plan. I know these sound like harsh words, but this is the reality. Anyone who has the opportunity who's hearing this has to have opportunity to have children, has to go and have children. There's no excuses. Amalek comes with all kinds of ideas. Oh, what's going to be with the future? Well, the future is in God Almighty's hands. Our job is to believe in God Almighty. The commandment to have children is both a commandment directly to the non-Jewish people and also included in the three of the seven commandments. One is to believe in God. Because when you have a child, you believe in God, that God's going to take care of the child. You have no control. You have nothing to say about how the child is going to turn out, what's going to happen to this child in his life. Only God Almighty does. You trust in God Almighty. It's included in the commandment against murder because, as we said before, preventing a child from coming into the world is murder. And it's considered theft because preventing a man from the pleasure of being together with his wife is also considered theft. So this is what we have to ground ourselves in. The warfare is a war on the mentality of how do we see bringing more human beings into the world. That's the core of everything. Do you see that the world has a capacity by God Almighty's divine goodness that He's abundantly recreating the world every single instant, every single human being has space and capacity and abundance for trillions of human beings? Or do you buy into a lie that's that any one human being is too much and two human beings is twice too much? God forbid. These are lies that people are buying into. And there's all kinds of convenience offers because when you're told, this person is told they could have the pleasure of intimacy without the having to pay for college and without the diapers and without all these other things, then many people get innocently confused and sold on this. But the messaging is not innocent. People falling for it is their own confusion. It's rampant. So when you cut out bringing new children into the world and you say, however, what is a person going to do with his sexual energy? He's going to use it in a non-reproductive way. Then guess what happens? Anything goes. Because it's not tethered to anything anymore. It's not tethered to its real divine intention. And then a person is wasting that divine energy in all kinds of places, with all kinds of people, all kinds of times. And that's a tremendous, tremendous tragedy. Each one of those times and each life lost, each potential life lost, and as a whole, the crash in human civilization that comes from that. Human civilization crashes from sexual immorality because that itself is the punishment. The punishment is there's no more growth, there's no more expansion, economic prosperity, spiritual awareness, health, everything comes from abundant growth. Abundant growth only comes to more human beings. The increase in the population propels growth. It propels expansion. Expanding countries are not only economically secure, they are physically secure because they have an energy of growth. When people start making calculations and deciding to put themselves and their own calculations and their own intellect ahead of God Almighty's intention, then everything crumbles. When a person is pursuing his own motivations rather than God Almighty's attention, the civilization collapses. And even if the child is born out of the relationship, but if the child does not grow up in a stable home with a mother and a father looking after that child every day, consequences are disastrous for that child and disastrous for that civilization. Because the whole fundamental principle of the Sheva Mitzvahs B'nai, the whole fundamental principle of the Torah is chinuch, of dedicating children to the service of God Almighty. And that requires in a human being two parents. We are not foxes or whatever other animal you want to refer to, where the mother takes care of the child and for a certain period of time, and then the child is on his own after a few months, sometimes a few days, a few hours, in case of insects, a few seconds. Sometimes the eggs are laid and there's no mother, and that's fine for frogs. But we're human beings, and foxes could be left within a year or two. I don't know exactly. Each animal is different. How long it stays with its mother until it learns the how to be successful in life, and then it's on its own. Human being needs parental input for their entire life. The longer that a child has parental input from both the father and mother, the greater and more productive that child is going to be in terms of being successful and bringing more children into the world. That's the true definition of productivity. Not how many degrees you have and not how many books you write, not how many students you have. It's bringing more children into the world. And those two parents need to be together in the same home, living in the same bedroom, for the child to get the best possible grounding. And those parents, when they realize the significance of what they're doing, they will be conducting themselves properly. They will be making sure to be loving to the children and bring up upright, righteous human beings that will reflect and live in accordance with God Almighty's divine image, in accordance with God Almighty's highest aspirations to them, and contributing the most to the rest of humanity, which is bringing more children into the world. So this is our introduction to starting to learn the details of for what is an encouraged relationship between a man and woman for the purpose of bringing children into the world and creating a home and a family, which is the ultimate fulfillment of a man and woman's experience in existence, is the closeness of that relationship. There is nothing that could substitute for that. There's no experience that could substitute for that. There's no traveling and no dog and no horse, and there's no anything else a human being can experience that could possibly substitute for that. Because a human being and a man and woman, they come together, they are creating the divine. They're creating the temple. The holy temple in Jerusalem is a mirror of the holy temple that every husband and wife create in the entire world. The revelation of the divine in their relationship and in their intimacy and bringing children to the world is brought to the forefront in a holy temple that's a house of prayer for all the nations that every human being is able to experience. But it's a reflection. It's not that the mikdash ma'at, that home, the bedroom, the foundation stone of a husband and wife's relationship is a miniature version of the holy temple. No, the holy temple is the bigger public expression of that holiness, that there's a place of focal point for all of these human beings that are brought into the world to connect with God Almighty. But the foundation, the real foundation stone, is the relationship of husband and wife in a marriage where children are brought into the world. And that is what creates the potential for a house of prayer that will be established for all the nations. The holy temple in the holy city, in the holy land, is because of the holiness of the relationship between a man and woman in every house in the world. And therefore you can understand why Amalek's best strategy is to confuse the people into diverting their energy into non-productive things, creating chaos, disrupted families, destroyed families, families that are not intact, all kinds of ways, sending the men out to war to get killed. Amalek is all for warfare and promotes both sides of every war, because every war reduces the world's population by the number of casualties times millions, because every human being within a short number of generations is able to have 1 million offspring. So Amalek is pushing both sides of the wars in the Middle East, both sides of the war, any war that they can invent and create is Amalek is in favor of, because every person that's no longer alive is a victory for Amalek in erasing, God forbid, the divine image from the world and preventing more children coming into the world. So they don't have a political agenda. They don't care one bit where the borders are. That's irrelevant to Amalek. What they care is someone's fighting over it. So there's a woman at home raising a child alone, or someone never got the chance to have a child at all. So this we have to see as saying don't fight, win over here is very valid. The way to win is to bring more children into the world. All the speeches about the conspiracies and all the speeches about all these kind of things, I always say to people are all kinds, whenever people speak to people about who are very into thinking about what's going on in the world, I say, okay, how many children do you have? How many children are you committed to bringing into the world? How many children are you committed to conceiving this week? That's the real test of our belief in God Almighty. The outcome is up to God Almighty. If a person, for some reason, is not able to conceive, that's not their calculation. None of us know. A person doesn't know. Some people don't have kids for 10 years, 15 years. All of a sudden, they're able to have children. But their intention every day on those years is to bring a child into the world. The outcome is up to God Almighty. But where the divine energy has to be driven and focused is where they're being propelled into bringing more children to the world. There's no excuse. That's the whole purpose of a human being. The reason we're here in this world is to encourage people to bring more children into the world ourselves, create an experience for our children, a feeling for our children that they will embrace bringing more children into the world, and then encouraging everyone else to bring more children into the world. God Almighty should bless you all. We'll continue, God willing, next week and get into more details of what is encouraged, what is prohibited, and with this introduction, we'll understand why every detail makes a difference. Every detail, what you think, where you look, how you talk, what actions you take, makes a difference. God bless you all.